They say I brought this upon myself. 7 sons, 3 daughters, dead in an instant. Livestock worth kingdoms, ashes. My body, a living map of agony. But here's what they don't know. Before the first boil erupted on my skin, before my children's last breath, before my world became a graveyard, there was a conversation in the throne room of eternity. About me, about you, about whether humans can love God when He gives them nothing but pain. Satan made a wager that your faith is just a transaction. That when the blessings stop, the worship dies. He's watching you right now, waiting for your breaking point. The question that shattered heaven and earth wasn't about my suffering. It was about yours.
In the land of Uz, where desert winds carry both blessing and curse, lived a man whose name would echo through eternity, not because of his wealth, though he possessed more than kings, not because of his family, though 10 children filled his halls with laughter, but because he was about to become the battlefield for the ultimate question: can the human heart love the Creator when creation turns against it? But our story begins not on earth, but in the courts of heaven itself, where the angels of God present themselves before the Almighty, and among them walks another, one whose very name means the accuser, Satan. And he has come with a proposition that will shatter one man's world, to answer a question that haunts every human soul. Is your faith real, or is it just a business transaction with God? Job was perfect in his generation, blameless, a man who feared God and turned away from evil. He had everything a righteous life was supposed to guarantee. But Satan saw something else. He saw a man who had never been tested. And the Lord said unto Satan,
Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him.
But Satan's reply would seal Job's fate.
Does Job fear God for nothing? You have blessed the work of his hands. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face.
The hedge of protection about to be lifted. In a single moment, Job became the unwitting participant in a cosmic experiment. The question wasn't whether Job deserved what was coming. The question was whether love for God could survive when every reason to love him was stripped away. It was a day like any other. His children were feasting, his flocks grazed peacefully. Job offered his morning sacrifices, just as he had for decades. He had no idea that before the sun set, he would lose everything. 4 messengers, 4 catastrophes, one day. The first arrived breathless.
The Sabines attacked. They have taken your oxen and donkeys. They have killed your servants. I alone have escaped to tell you.
The second messenger arrived right after the first.
Fire from heaven has burned up your sheep and servants. I alone have escaped to tell you.
The third messenger arrived, blood on his robes.
The Chaldeans formed 3 bands and raided your camels. They killed your servants. I alone have escaped to tell you.
3 disasters. But Satan wasn't finished. The fourth messenger fell to his knees.
Your children were feasting in their eldest brother's house when a great wind struck. The house collapsed. They're all dead. I alone have escaped to tell you.
In the span of minutes, Job had lost his livelihood, his legacy, and his children. Everything Satan had predicted would break him, but what happened next would shake the foundations of hell itself. Job worshipped.
Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Round 1-2. The human. Satan had underestimated the human heart, but he wasn't finished. When the angels of God presented themselves again before the Lord, Satan came among them, and God's voice carried a note of vindication.
Have you considered my servant Job? He still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause.
But Satan's reply revealed the true depth of his hatred.
Skin for skin. All that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face.
Very well then. He is in your hands, but you must spare his life.
Job woke that morning a broken but faithful man. By evening, he would wish he had died with his children. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, Satan afflicted Job with loathsome sores. The pain was unbearable, the isolation complete. Even his own breath became offensive to those around him. And then came the cruelest blow of all. His wife, broken by grief, looked at her suffering husband and spoke words that cut deeper than any physical pain.
Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die.
But Job's response would echo through history.
Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil?
In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Round 2 to the human. But now came a different kind of torment. The torment of bad theology. News of Job's catastrophe spread like wildfire. His 3 closest friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, traveled from distant lands with one mission: to comfort their broken friend. But when they saw him from afar, they didn't recognize the man they once knew. The wealthy patriarch had become a living skeleton, covered in festering sores, scraping his rotting flesh with broken pottery. They wept, they mourned, and then they did something profound. For 7 days and nights they sat in silence. Because his grief was so great, no word seemed adequate. But on the 8th day, Job's agony erupted in words that would shake heaven itself.
Let the day perish on which I was born. Why is light given to him who is in misery?
And that's when his friends made the most devastating mistake possible. They opened their mouths.
Remember now who that was innocent ever perished, Those who plow iniquity reap the same.
With one sentence, Eliphaz had just told a righteous man that his suffering was proof of his sin. The battle for Job's soul had found new weapons. What followed was a masterclass in how to destroy someone who's already broken. Bildad struck next, his words sharp as daggers.
Does God pervert justice? If your children sinned against him, he delivered them into the hand of their transgression.
He had just told a grieving father that his dead children got what they deserved. Then Zophar delivered the killing blow.
Know that God exacts of you less than your iniquity deserves. You're getting off easy, Job.
3 cycles of speeches. 3 friends turned prosecutors, each one more convinced than the last that they had solved the mystery of Job's suffering with a neat little formula. But Job wasn't just going to take it. His response would tear their theology to shreds.
I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. How long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words?
And then Job said something that would echo through eternity. Words that would make his friend's blood run cold.
I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth.
Even in his darkest hour, stripped of everything, Job's faith burned brighter than their certainty. But his friends weren't finished. They had one more weapon. Direct accusation. When logic fails, when theology crumbles, there's always one last resort for those determined to be right. Fabricate evidence. Eliphaz looked Job in the eye and unleashed a torrent of lies. Accusations of stealing from the poor, denying water to the thirsty, withholding bread from the hungry. Every word fabricated, every charge invented to make his theology work. Job had reached his breaking point, not with God, with his friends. What followed was Job's final defense, a devastating oath of innocence that would silence his accusers forever. Point by point, Job dismantled their charges. Sin by sin, he declared his integrity. He called down curses on himself if he had committed any of their invented crime. And then something extraordinary happened. A young man who had been listening in silent fury finally exploded. Elihu, son of Barachel, younger than the others and absolutely enraged, not at Job, but at Job's friends for their spectacular failure to understand God's ways. Elihu delivered what the others could not, a theology that didn't require Job to be guilty. He spoke of suffering as discipline, as communication, as refinement. For the first time, someone suggested that Job's pain might have a purpose beyond punishment. But even Elihu's wisdom was about to be dwarfed, because the conversation was about to be joined by someone who had been silent for far too long. The Lord of the Storm was coming. And then, silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The kind that announces the presence of the Almighty. When God finally spoke, his first words weren't comfort. They weren't explanation. They were a challenge that would humble every human who heard them.
Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me.
God had turned the tables. No longer was Job questioning the Almighty. Now the Creator would question the creature. What followed was the most spectacular display of divine power ever recorded. God took Job on a tour of creation itself, from the foundations of the earth to the constellations in the heavens.
Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Do you give the horse his might? Does the eagle mount up at your command?
With each question, Job shrank smaller, not in shame, but in recognition of just how vast, how incomprehensible, how utterly beyond human understanding God truly was. But God wasn't finished. He had two more witnesses to call to the stand. Two creatures that would make his point in ways words never could.
Behold, Behemoth and Leviathan.
Behemoth emerged from the depth of creation itself, a beast so massive, so powerful, that the earth trembled beneath its steps. God's voice carried a note of pride as he described his creation.
This is the chief of my ways. Only I, who made him, can approach him with a sword.
The message was crystal clear. If Job couldn't control a single creature that God had made, how could he possibly question the Creator's management of the entire universe? But Behemoth was just the opening act. From the depths rose Leviathan, a monster so fearsome that mythology itself couldn't contain it. Scales like shields, breath like fire, eyes like the dawn.
Who then is he who can stand before me? Everything under heaven is mine.
The cosmic courtroom had rendered its verdict. Job wasn't on trial. His understanding was. His perspective, his very human attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible. And in that moment, Job finally understood. The question was never, why do I suffer? The question was, who is God? When Job finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. But those whispers would thunder through history. He acknowledged God's absolute power, confessed his ignorance, and admitted he had spoken of things too wonderful for human understanding. He then prayed for the forgiveness of his friends for their false accusations. In a stunning reversal, the men who had condemned Job were now required to ask him to intercede for them. And when Job prayed for those who had wounded him, that act of forgiveness became the key to his restoration. The moment Job interceded for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes. Not just restored, doubled them. 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 female donkeys, exactly double what he had lost. But the greatest restoration was yet to come. 7 sons and 3 daughters, the same number as before, because in God's economy, the first children weren't replaced. They were waiting in eternity. Job lived another 140 years. He saw 4 generations of his descendants. He died old and full of days, a phrase reserved for those who had lived life to its absolute fullest. But here's what Job never learned. He never discovered the conversation in heaven that started it all. He never knew about Satan's wager. He never learned that his suffering had cosmic significance. Job died without getting the why he had demanded. But he got something infinitely more valuable. He got God himself. And that changes everything. Because Job's story isn't ancient history. It's your story. It's our story. It's the story of every human being who has ever looked at their circumstances and wondered if God has forgotten them. And that's where the real lesson begins. Right now, someone watching this is living their own Book of Job. The diagnosis came back positive. The pink slip arrived. The relationship ended. The dream died. And you're asking the same question Job asked. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Where is God in my suffering? Our culture has fed you the same lie Job's friends peddled. That blessing equals righteousness. That suffering equals sin. That if you're faithful enough, rich enough, positive enough, God will exempt you from pain. But Job's story demolishes that delusion. Job was blameless, and he lost everything. The Book of Job doesn't answer the question, why do the righteous suffer? It answers a far more important question. Can you trust God when life makes no sense? Sometimes he allows suffering, not because he loves you less, but because he knows something about you that you don't know about yourself. The warning is this: Satan's strategy hasn't changed since Job's day. He's still making the same wager about you. He's counting on your faith being conditional, transactional, dependent on God giving you what you want. And just like Job, you'll be surrounded by well-meaning friends who will try to solve the mystery of your pain with neat little formulas. They'll show you their perfect lives and wonder why yours is falling apart, offering the same worthless comfort wrapped in modern packaging. But here's what Satan fears most, what makes him tremble with rage. He fears the person who will say what Job said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." He fears the faith that doesn't need explanations, the love that doesn't require understanding. Because that kind of faith proves something about the human heart that shakes the foundations of hell itself. Right now, in this moment, as you watch this, there's a conversation happening about you, in places you cannot see, with stakes you cannot imagine. The question isn't whether you'll face your own ash heap. You will. The question is what you'll prove about the human heart when you do.